Good day, beautiful people. This is Natalie Silver. Welcome back to Life Treasures and Golden Moments, where I share with you true stories of miracles and stories of inspiration. I hope that they are uplifting to you and that you can find some comfort in them when you need it and something to brighten your day. Today is a story of faith. It was written by Ron Mell, and it's called Right on Time. In our lives, we never know how we're going to affect or touch another's life, and it may not show up till later, in a week, a year, 5 years, and this is such a story. I hope you enjoy it. Roger Sims had just left the military and was anxious to take his uniform off once and for all. He was hitchhiking home, and his heavy duffel bag made the trip even more arduous than hitchhiking normally is. Flashing his thumb to an oncoming car, he lost hope when he saw that it was a shiny black, expensive car, so new that it had a temporary license in the back window. Hardly the type of car that would stop for a hitchhiker. But to his amazement, the car stopped and the passenger door opened. He ran toward the car, placed his duffel bag carefully in the back, and slid into the leather-covered seat. He was greeted by the friendly smile of a handsome older gentleman with distinguished gray hair and a deep tan. "Hello, son. Are you on leave or are you going home for good?" "I just got out of the Army and I'm going home for the first time in several years," answered Roger. "Well, you're in luck if you're going to Chicago," smiled the man. "Not quite that far," said Roger, "but my home is on the way. Do you live there, mister?" "Yes, I have a business there." And with that, they were on their way. After giving each other brief life histories and talking about everything under the sun, Roger, who was a Christian, felt a strong compulsion to witness to Mr. Hanover about Christ. But witnessing to an elderly, wealthy businessman who has obviously had everything he could ever want was a scary prospect indeed. Roger kept putting it off, but as he neared his destination, he realized that it was now or never. "Mr. Hanover," began Roger, I would like to talk to you about something very important." He then proceeded to explain the way of salvation. On timely asking Mr. Hanover if he would like to receive Christ as his Savior. To Roger's astonishment, the big car pulled over to the side of the road. Roger thought for a moment that Mr. Hanover was about to throw him out. Then a strange and wonderful thing happened. The businessman bowed his head to the steering wheel, and he began to cry, affirming that he did indeed want to accept Christ into his heart. He thanked Roger for talking to him, saying that this is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. He then dropped Roger at his house and traveled on toward Chicago. 5 years went by, and Roger Sims married, had a child, and started a business of his own. One day, while packing for a business trip to Chicago, he came across a small, gold-embossed business card, which Mr. Hanover had given him years earlier. When Roger arrived in Chicago, he looked up Hanover Enterprises and found it to be located downtown in a very tall, important-looking building. The receptionist told him that it would be impossible to see Mr. Hanover, but that if he was an old friend, he would be able to see Mrs. Hanover. A little disappointed, he was led into a poshly decorated office, where a woman in her 50s was sitting at a huge oak desk. She extended her hand. "You knew my husband?" Roger explained how Mr. Hanover had been kind enough to give him a ride back home. A look of interest passed across her face. "Can you tell me what date that was?" "Sure," said Roger. "It was May 7th, 5 years ago, the day I was discharged from the Army." "And did anything special happen on your ride? Anything unusual?" Roger hesitated. Should he mention giving his witness? Had it been some source of contention between the two, which resulted in a marital breakup or separation? But once again he felt the prompting of the Lord to be truthful. "Mrs. Hanover, Your husband accepted the Lord into his heart that day. I explained the gospel message to him, and he pulled to the side of the road and wept, and then chose to pray a prayer of salvation. Suddenly, she began to sob uncontrollably. After several minutes, she regained enough control to explain what had happened. I grew up in a Christian home, but my husband did not. I had prayed for my husband's salvation for many years, and I believed God would save him, but just after he let you out of his car, on May 7th, he passed away in a horrible head-on collision. He never arrived home. I thought God had not kept his promise, and I stopped living for the Lord 5 years ago because I blamed him for not keeping his word. I can identify with Mrs. Hanover. Perhaps you can too. There are long, lonely stretches in life when it seems as if God has simply become indifferent toward our plight and bored or apathetic about our fervent prayers. It's like staring at a tightly wrapped, mysterious, and unavailable presence under a tree. As time goes on and hope stretches thin, we begin to wonder if God really has any gifts for us. Maybe you've been waiting a long time for situations to change in your life. You've been waiting for a change in your health, in your relationships, in your spouse, in your children, in your job, or in your finances, or in your spiritual life. And it seems the delay goes on forever. It seems Christmas will never come. It seems the light will never change. It seems you've dialed the Lord's 911 line 1,000 times, and he's never answered. Mary and Martha knew all about that. They watched their brother weaken and fail. His life slipped through their fingers like sand, and they couldn't stop it, and the Lord did not come. But then again, he did come, and it was too late. But it wasn't too late, because what he had in mind was something so far beyond their thoughts and experience and hopes and dreams that they didn't even think to ask for it. It was a very good thing wrapped in a very bad thing, and he delivered it himself, right on time. He always does. As an ending to the story today, I'd like to share this little writing that was written by Margaret Fishback Powers called Footprints. One night I had a dream. I dreamed I was walking along the beach with the Lord, and across the sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene I noticed 2 sets of footprints in the sand. One belonged to me and the other to the Lord. When the last scene of my life flashed before us, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. I noticed that many times along the path of my life there were only one set of footprints. I also noticed that it happened at the very lowest and saddest times in my life. This really bothered me, and I questioned the Lord about it. Lord, you said that once I decided to follow you, you would walk with me all the way. But I noticed that during the most troublesome times in my life, there were only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, in times when I needed you most, you should leave me. The Lord replied, "My precious child, my precious, precious child, I love you, and I would never, never leave you during your times of trial and suffering. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you." This is Natalie Silver. Thank you for joining me today. And until next time, take care. Have a beautiful week. May your days be filled with joy and sunshine. God bless.